Are you constantly fearful of firing that turn bluff just because you're not really sure exactly when it's going to work and what goes into it? Well, you're in the right place. Today I'm going to give you some tips for exploring turn bluffing situations more, show you the model, explore some GTO and exploitative analysis with these spots, and just generally prepare you for finding additional turn bluffs. Let's get into it. Good morning, how are we doing today? My name is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit, and today I want to talk about turn barreling with you and really help you find more turn bluffs in every session you play. When you know what to look for, things get much easier, but if you're like most players, you tend to get cold feet, you tend to start checking more turns behind and really not continuing with enough of that air, which can be extremely problematic for a multitude of reasons. So instead of staying really big picture here, I think it's more helpful to zoom in, look at a specific example, and crack it apart a couple different ways, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. So let's just say we're playing a 5-10 live, low jack open raises 240, which yes is large for an online size, but pretty darn normal for a live cash sizing. So again, they open to 40, you 3-bet to 120 total on the button with king 10 suited. They call your 3-bet, go heads up to a flop of queen 5-4 rainbow, giving you a bunch of backdoor draws. They check, you c-bet 480, they check call on the turn. Let's just explore this a couple of different ways. So what I want to do at this point is explore two different turn cards and our general reaction on the turn with them. So the first is the ace of spades, which of course is a pretty darn great card for us. It's an overcard, looks like it could hit us, also gives us a gut shot, which is pretty great. And then the other is the 7 of diamonds, which is obviously not really improving us at all and is a card that probably doesn't hit us in much of any capacity. Now there are essentially three different ways that I explore this when I'm studying a spot like this between sessions. The first is just the raw technical analysis. How does my opponent's range actually hit in this situation, and what do I think they're really going to do with that range? Number two is the GTO solver approved analysis of it, and then number three is the exploitative analysis if I think that my opponent is not going to be implementing a perfect GTO strategy, and hint, humans cannot do that perfectly, so it's oftentimes an exploitative conversation, but it's very, very helpful to really understand what is the GTO underpinning of a specific spot. So let's just start by doing some raw technical analysis first, and for this we can use Flopzilla Pro. And if we start by plugging in our two hole cards, which of course is king 10 of hearts, the board itself, and then also our opponent's range. And by the way, this comes from a combination of the GTO ranges app, taking the preflop ranges directly out of there and then doing a GTO plus analysis of them. So this is what our opponent should have continued with against a c-bet on the flop. And again, we go here, and then when we plug in the ace of spades, let's analyze our opponent's range a little bit. So some of the ways that I think about this is, what are the kind of really strong pockets in my opponent's range? What are some of the more marginal pockets? What is the density of my opponent's range? And do I think they're going to fold any of those things enough of the time, right? Because when we're bluffing, our major focus is our opponent going to fold often enough that we can make auto profit in this situation? If not, can we run a double barrel, or actually technically in this spot a triple barrel? That is the way that I'm thinking about bluffing at a very, very basic level. So when I'm exploring a spot like this from a technical level, one of the first things I'm looking for are, what are the hands that I think my opponent is definitely 100% for sure not going to fold with if I bluff against them. And in this situation, I think 2 pair plus is probably pretty darn fair. Do I think they're going to fold a set in a 3-bet pot? Goodness no. 2 pair? Goodness no. So because of that, we notice that's 31%, and that's a pretty decent chunk of range. If we then also think about top pair, if they did end up improving to that ace on the turn, do I think they're going to fold that either? Probably not a ton of the time, so their overall continuance right this moment is 41%. And then I also look at things like their middle pair, and you notice that when we plug that all in, and also pocket pairs below second card, right, pocket jacks just now got reduced down to third pair. Are they going to continue with that? Certainly questionable and debatable, but if we plug all that in right off the bat, you notice that we have a lot of continuance. If we get rid of the now third pairs, you know, that changes a little bit. Now we're at about half and half between folding. But if we think they're going to continue with pretty much any single pair, then of course they're not going to be folding a tremendous amount right this moment. However, most players aren't really going to continue with every single pair when the turn is a card that looks like A, it should hit you a decent chunk of the time, and 2, applies a decent amount of pressure, again pushing all of those those what were second pairs on the flop now down to third pair on the turn. But let's say instead of the turn being the ace of spades, we also explore that other turn card, which was the seven of diamonds, a very, very different card. So now all of a sudden when we look at things like two pair plus, right, that's 16% of their range, as opposed to on the ace of spades that was actually 31%, so kind of a big change there. When we look at things like top pair plus, that's about a third now, again very different than the 41% when the turn was the ace of spades. And as we start factoring in more of those cards, pocket pairs below top card is very interesting, right? Because pocket jacks when the turn was an ace got reduced down to third pair. Pocket jacks is still the same second pair when the turn is that seven of diamonds. So there's probably going to be a decent chunk of continuance change from those kind of second pairs on the flop that now just don't face as much pressure or actually end up picking up additional equity, right? If it's pocket eights, now all of a sudden it has a gut shot to go along with the pair. So again, probably going to be a little bit more continuance when the turn is the seven of diamonds versus the ace of spades. Alright, so that's the raw technical analysis of a spot like this using a tool like Flopzilla Pro. And of course, in real time, you're not going to be using a tool like this, but when you do enough off-table practice with it, you can start to eyeball and estimate it and get a lot closer in real time, which is going to really indicate, hey, this is a spot that's probably ripe for bluffing, or a spot that, maybe not so much. Alright, so with all that said, let's move over and do some GTO analysis using the GTO Plus solver. Alright, so we have the entire tree all set up. Again, our opponent checks the flop, we decide to fire, and they call. We're setting the turn as the ace of spades. And a couple things right off the bat. First and foremost is notice the donking going on, or the leading that the solver suggests. Notice that the solver suggests that our opponent should actually be leading on this ace of spades a pretty good chunk of the time, about 31% of the time. If we flip that over to the seven of diamonds, notice that goes right back to kind of a default check almost all the time, donk almost never. If nothing else, I find that slightly interesting, and I think a lot of players would completely miss that, but it's worth this kind of exploration. Again, if you already have the tools out, why not plug that in and just kind of see which cards in the deck impact overall leading from your opponent. Doesn't mean they're going to lead a proper amount of the time, of course, but it's helpful for you to know this nonetheless. But if we go back and switch the turn to the ace of spades instead of the seven, assume our opponent checks and we are looking at firing, all fires are in blue, all checks are in green in case you've never used GTO Plus before. And if we hover over King 10, notice that the King 10 of hearts combo, the one we actually have, is a mix between betting and checking with a little bit more checking than overall betting. But you notice that in general, yes, the solver is still liking firing with some of these nothing hands, and this is one that has a gut shot on it, and you notice that the overall gut shots are a little bit more favoring checking than betting, but it's still a mix across them, and you can always hover and see all of the gut shot combinations right this moment, which includes everything from ace 3 to king 10 to jack 10 suited. Alright, so that's with the ace of spades in the turn, but now let's switch it over to the seven of diamonds, analyze the other one. Say our opponent checks, we're looking at firing. Again, fires are in blue, and if we hover over king 10 suited, we notice that king 10 of hearts is still a mix, but a larger chunk of it is going to be checks instead of fires in this exact situation. And when we hover over gut shots down below, we notice that gut shots are actually more favoring a fire as opposed to a check if we're looking at all of them. But really in this spot, that's just going to be anything with an 8 in it, so ace 8 suited or pocket 8s. And yeah, it makes sense that a little bit more of that is going to get fired than just check behind. But again, king 10 in this exact situation, if it's the diamonds combination or the clubs combo, the solver likes firing that a very large chunk, but if it's the spades or the hearts combo, the solver is preferring that that gets mixed, but a little bit more preference towards checking with the king 10 of hearts specifically. Alright, so at this point we've done the technical analysis, we've done the GTO analysis, and by the way, you don't want to completely over extrapolate here because this is a 3-bet pot, it has more restrained ranges, we're using GTO preflop ranges in the first place, it is a specific flop texture, whatever, so don't over extrapolate, but of course you can take and should take the principles and the model from this. And then finally we need to look at some exploitative stuff, so let's move over to that now. So the way that I think about this from an exploitative point of view is thinking about what is my opponent's actual range right this moment, how does it actually hit, compare that to some very basic auto profit math, and then decide if this is a spot where I think it's likely going to work enough the time to justify making the bluff. So if we start by taking that ace of spades in the turn and we think about how our opponent 30% would continue if we fired. Let's just say we're going to fire, 180 into a 415 pot. If we fire 180 into that, we think they're only going to continue with top pair plus right that moment. The break-even percentage of that bet is 30%, and we think that they are going to be continuing 41%, because that's how often they have top pair plus, and of course folding the other 59%. Their folding percentage is much higher than the 30% requirement from the break-even percentage, and as such, this is an auto profit fire, so yeah, why not throw King 10 of hearts into this? Why just mix it like the solver would do when you can clearly just fire it here and expect to print profit? And by the way, you can do this with pretty much all of your bluff combinations right this moment. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about when I mention things like auto profit and break-even percentage and where those numbers are coming from, watch that video right up there. I'll leave a card for a video that will explain all that, walk you through the formulas. Very, very helpful if you're brand new to this kind of subject. But if we change the spot up a little bit, instead of the ace of spades, we look at that 7 of diamonds instead, notice different continuance there. So if we think, again, firing 180 into 415 still has a 30% break-even percentage, if we think our opponent's only going to continue with top pair plus, which is happening 34%, then yeah, of course this is going to be good for us, right? They're folding almost 2/3 of the time, we only need them to fold 30%, and as such, sure, fire away. However, if we think they're going to continue with those middle pair plus combinations, open into straight draws, all that sort of fun stuff, then all of a sudden we're in a situation where they're continuing 81% of the time. So we're expecting 19% of folds, we need 30% of folds, and this is not going to be an outright profitable fire right this moment. Doesn't mean we don't want to think about also going for that triple barrel, but it's not going to be outright profitable firing King 10 of hearts in that situation on the 7 of diamonds turn card. So those are the overall models and approaches for studying spots like this between sessions. But of course the work isn't totally done yet, because the next step you want to think about, but I'm not going to cover in this video because it'll get a little bit too long, but if you want to see an additional video on this subject, let me know. But essentially is thinking about the river. So if you fire the turn and you get called, whether you thought that was going to be outright profitable or not outright profitable, if you do get that turn bluff called, when do you want to check it behind on the river versus continue that fire and go for the triple barrel? And one of the biggest questions, especially with a hand like this, is my King 10 here a contender for solid check back showdown value, or is it better just to triple barrel it and turn it into a bluff and complete it all the way through? Just let me know if you want to see a full video on that as well, otherwise I'll just leave you to ponder that question and maybe do a little bit of study as well. And by the way, if you want to continue studying more spots like this, and not just turn bluffs, but also river bluffs and flop bluffs and everything in between, I would definitely suggest checking out my advanced poker workbook if you haven't already, splitsuit.com/advanced to learn more. And by the way, everything we talked about in this video is in that book as well, over there on page 150. So if you're really looking to explore and get some extra benefit and value of looking not just at GTO exploration, but also exploitative exploration, and doing so side by side, the Advanced Poker Workbook is exactly what you're looking for. Over 1,000 questions, a complete companion video course showing you how to do every single section, GTO plus save files to explore everything at your own pace as well. Everything is included. Again, splitsuit.com/advanced to learn more, or pick up your paperback copy today on Amazon. But that's going to wrap it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you have any comments or questions, please do not hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you back shortly with a brand new video. And in the meantime, good luck out there and happy grinding.